We call those intrusive thoughts. Anyway, um, so we're going to go back to what we were saying before. What was it? Oh, yeah, the intro.
Yeah.
Let's do that part.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another exciting episode of the People's Penicillin Podcast, a podcast of hope where I'm going to be searching near and far, far and wide to find hope and people doing the real work of inspiring other human beings, making change in this crazy world that we live in. Today's guest, I'm very excited to introduce to you, author and poet, healer, and so many other things, Penelope Rose, who had a life that most would consider perfect: love, money, future, security, and over has had to watch that life crumble. So whether it was that life or another romantic relationship, so many times you've had to reinvent yourself. And your book, Journey Back to Self, as well as the Awakening the Divine Feminine poetry book and the workbook and your sound healing and your Reiki and so many other things that we're going to talk about today, I believe you are starting at ground zero for what I'm calling the revolution. And it starts within, because with political stuff, and I know you're so excited to talk politics with me, we can't talk about the greater picture until we show up ready. And it's the same thing with romantic relationships. And so I'm trying to draw these parallels between relationships, the relationship to self, others, and then the grander we, because how can we talk about politics unless we've figured out our own shit?
Mhm.
So thank you for being here today, Penelope.
Thank you for having me. Excited.
There's two things I want to start. When I first met you, and we should just get this out of the way soon, so that you
Yeah.
have this clip
Yeah,
and
I
you
was
can use
like,
this clip wherever you want.
let's just acknowledge this.
I met you a few years ago, and I met you as Georgie,
Yes.
and now you go by Penelope. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I still am Georgie. I will always be Georgie. Georgie is my birth name, and Penelope is a name I took on when I decided to be a writer. A lot of writers take on a pseudonym and a pen name, and sometimes I feel like people take on pen names because they're writing in secret. And then I decided and determined that wasn't my path. So I'm looking to build space and build community on the internet. So I just embodied that name, and people I love and have known me still call me Georgie, and that's fine. And then people that are meeting me for the first time and are connecting with me from the podcast and an author call me Penelope. So I like to call Penelope's like my Slim Shady, but I'll always be Eminem. You know, that's a good parallel. That's a good parallel for me.
Where does Marshall Mathers fit
That's
in
what I
there?
meant. That's what I meant. That's what I meant. See, he has three. That's what I meant. Okay, so Slim Shady is Penelope Sophia Rose. Eminem is Penelope. And Marshall Mathers is Georgie Forever.
That makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense to
So,
me.
so it's not like, I know sometimes, even in the spiritual community, a lot of times people actually do change their names because they resonate more with it. And I just feel that, you know, I resonate with all versions of myself. So it's kind of like when somebody has a nickname or whatever, I go as Penelope from here on out on my social medias. That's how I introduce myself at the podcast, just so it's not confusing, because it'd be really confusing to explain all of that every time I talk and be like, and meeting people as Georgie, but then being like, oh, find all my writing at this completely other name that you have no idea what I'm talking about. So that's kind of just to clear up that confusion a little bit. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
so you're all of them. You are Georgie, but you are also Penelope Sophia Rose.
Yes. And there's a whole
Or
other
Penelope
story
Rose.
with that name, but we won't get into that. It's kind of just like along my spiritual journey and, you know, raising my vibration and resonating with different things and growing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I always have to make sure. I'm like, am I talking to Georgie or Penelope right now? I always have to clarify. So,
The
all
answer
right.
is
So,
yes. Yes, and all.
yes, and all. Cool. I'm glad we cleared that up. But I want to dig right in. So, your book, Journey Back to Self.
Mhm.
You're running your own podcast. You're an author. You're a poet. You do sound healing. You do this Reiki stuff. You're existing in this space of introspective healing. And I want to tell you, trying to make my way through your book feels like I'm in an action movie and I'm going through a secret. I'm going through someplace I'm not supposed to be in, and it's booby trapped. And I am tiptoeing my way around all of my trauma. So to see romance and emotional loss and heartache through the eyes of the feminine is bumping into a whole lot of stuff for me. And I want you to know that I'm super grateful, because I don't know that I would have picked up the book if I didn't know you. And that this is coming, I think, from the vulnerable male state, where if I saw it, I'd be like, you know how I feel about the movie The Notebook. Okay.
Yeah, we won't get
Like,
into
I
that
like,
argument.
I don't know what it is, but I'm like, I can't hear this. I know I don't want to hear this. There's going to be so much information in here that maybe I need to hear, but I don't want to hear.
Hmm.
And so dealing with healing, I want to start really macro, really big. To you, what does it mean to heal? It's this blanket term that we hear. And I know that the answer you give could be like an hour-long TED talk.
Right.
So I want to, like, in the most basic sense of it, this buzzword that we hear all over social media, all over the books at BAM and Barnes and Noble or whatever. What does it mean to you to actually heal from the inside, that icky inside stuff?
Yeah, so I think the best way to explain this is my whole brand. So for me, healing is coming back to self. So journey back to self, come home, coming all the way back to who we are at a core soul level. So I was super big into personal development for 10 years. And to me, personal development was like learning things and putting things on. And how I would describe healing is taking everything off, taking all the beliefs off, taking all the negative experiences that have happened to you, even the positive ones, and slowly stripping all the layers that you've put on over the course of your life and remembering who you actually are at a soul level. And then opening up a question of all your different beliefs and do I still believe that and why do I believe that? Because most of the things that we believe we got from other people, experiences, different things. So I feel like healing is going back and stripping through the layers, because when we are children, we believe we can do everything. We love looking at ourselves in the mirror and everything is fun, and you know, my son jumps from the top row of the couch and believes he can fly. And at some point, all of that stuff starts going away. One traumatic experience, one negative thing said to you by a teacher, on and on and on and on. Society, politics, everything that's pouring into you. So I feel that healing is taking all that back and then rebuilding from parenting yourself, and regardless of what parents you had, deciding what do I actually believe and healing those wounds, going back into those different wounds that took you down a complete path of maybe insecurity or fear or XYZ that's, holding you back in your life going forward.
Man, did you have that written down, dude? That was great. You touched on so many things that are hugely important. One is, what do I believe? What was instilled in me? And do I still believe that? Right?
Mhm.
That's massive. And it's funny because we automatically, I heard the word child in my mind, and then you immediately start going into, as a child, these things are fun. We're looking in the mirror when everything is free, fun. There are no chains about it. And then you worded your way into parenting yourself. And
Mhm.
so the reason I find this particular conversation so fascinating is, obviously, this podcast, my brand is through the political change, the lens of political change. And after decades of existing in this space, I'm telling you that people will enter that arena and they're not fucking ready to be there,
Yeah. And
because
you and I relate a lot on the one concept of that we're all connected. And so I feel like everything I do, my intention is to get people back to remembering how powerful they are, that you don't need somebody else to heal, even if someone else did things to you. We can heal everything on our own. We can forgive people on our own. We can come back to deciding what we even like. Kids know what they like, and then as you get older, it's like, oh, you shouldn't like that. You should like this. And all of the molding. So one of my biggest intentions is to remind everyone of their power, because we all are a part of the one. So it's most of us are giving our power away all day long, and other people liking us, or the government. I'm only using this example because of you, but different things like that. We're just constantly giving our power away. Even if, like, oh, I'm going through a struggle, I don't know what to do, let me call for people. And we're forgetting that we are connected to the one. We are connected to source. We have the power to reparent ourselves, to know what to do, to follow our intuition. So everything I do, I feel, is just empowering someone, whoever I work with, to get back to that journey, back to self, and remember that you are capable, because along the way you were taught that you were not.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the reason this is important is obviously it brings a sense of peace and purpose to the individual who is saying, I'm going back to myself, right? And doing this sort of healing work. But to me, the greater purpose it serves is, and you'll notice it right away, is one, yes, you'll have a deeper relationship with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but then we're also going to be able to have better relationships with romantic partners,
Mm-hmm.
family, friends. What we're talking about is healing ourselves from the inside so that we can remember maybe the power we have in that unity with people. So whether that's unity with your son or my daughter or our extended family, friends, lovers, our communities at large, if we don't do this stuff, we show up all dysregulated. And so the phrase that came to my mind, and this is such a brilliantly nuanced part of this whole conversation, I'm so excited to do this, is we all deserve love, but are we all ready for it?
Right.
Are we ready to be there? We deserve it. And the same with politics is, somebody might say, well, this affects me and I deserve to be here and talk about this. What the hell is going on? And it's like, yes, my friend, my brother, my sister, you deserve to be here because this does affect you, but are you ready for what it requires of you to be in this space and talk to the people and negotiate these complicated things, which to me just sounds like a marriage. It sounds like a relationship too. It's like, you deserve this love, but are you ready to show up there? It's really special, and I'm grateful that you came into my space, because you've helped me connect that dot. And then the importance of divinity, which is the next thing I want to talk about, is you grew up Christian, Catholic, what
Catholic. Yeah.
Catholic? Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as did I, and that was a point that we connected on. So walk me through what it's like growing up in a very like dogmatic, or a lot of ideologues exist in religion. It doesn't mean all religious people are bad. It's just some of them become so focused on the rules that maybe they lose connection. So tell me what that's like going into the space you're in now, because when we say sound healing, you're working with yoga instructors, Reiki energy, um, maybe even some of the stuff that you do as like a medium. Um, and I think you can tell us a little bit about that, because I don't see, I feel like I don't see a whole lot of that on your social. So we can cut this part out later if you want. But I feel like it's important to talk about. So let me jump in on a cut point here in case we do cut that out. What's it like going from a very like dogmatic, traditional idea of spirituality to where you're at now? Like, because there's going to be a lot of fear stepping into the spaces that you're going into now.
Oh, absolutely. I feel that that's what I talk about as spiritual awakening, because it's the best way to describe it is a huge process of unlearning. So basically, and this goes back to what you were just talking about, love. What I was going to say about the love is, there is always an infinite amount of love around you. It's, where is your capacity of receiving? Because we all can only give or we can only receive what we're able to give, basically at the level that we're able to give it. So we're all walking around as, wounded inner children. So if we have different blocks and different things like that, so if somebody's hurting you, for example, and they have a bunch of abandonment wounds, they can only love you to the capacity that they love themselves. So if they haven't done much work, it's a shallow pool. So they can only give you that. So the reason that it's so important for us to go deep within ourselves, and you were talking about how that affects everything else, is because the deeper you go as you clear this stuff, it's like your depth of love for yourself is so deep that then you love everyone else to that capacity. Now, people's ability to receive that is also per their work. So let's say you come into a situation where you're in a relationship and someone has done a lot more work depth wise on themselves, and they have all of this love, but you only have this much and then you're full. A lot of times that's when people run, or they cheat, or they can't handle it and they kind of leave. And then this person's oftentimes, I feel, is left sitting there like, what did I do wrong, blah blah blah, but maybe they just had way more capacity to love. So you love everyone else in your life better. You're kind of overflowing after you do this healing work. But one differentiation that I feel is really important is, a lot of times it's like, I have to wait until I heal to find love, or I have to wait until I heal to do this. We're always constantly deepening, right? So it's like, you deserve love all the time. You don't have to wait until you get to a certain point to have a partner or a friendship or whatever. In my experience, the depth of the relationships has just gotten better and better and better, because the deeper I've gone within myself, I attract people that are deeper within themselves. So the connection points, the way that we, even just like my women friendships right now, are so incredible. And like 5 years ago, it was just constantly people betraying me or catty, blah blah blah. It's because my depth within myself was a shallow pool. So what was I attracting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So back to the religion, I feel it's a very similar thing. So the way that I was raised, Catholicism, the biggest way that I could explain my experience with organized religion is, there's a lot of separation. So separation from source. So everything that I've transitioned into now is anti-separation, which is something that you and I align with in a lot of ways. So being raised in a space where, here is God, you are here, here's all the rules for you to be approved of by God. God will always forgive you, but if you don't apologize for it, you burn in hell. There's just all these different things, right? And from a very young age, I was like, this ain't adding up, okay? Like, I remember being in 6th grade arguing with the teacher. I was like, and I'm full on straight. And I didn't even know anyone that was gay at that time, that many years ago in my small town. But I was like, you're telling me, if God loves us and we're all created equal, and he made us in love, that if a man loves another man, they just burn in hell. That's just it. Like, there's certain things. I'm like, that doesn't make any freaking sense to me. Like, I remember just kind of, but I just kept going on the path. And so with that kind of separation, I don't feel that there's ever that deep connection like I was just talking about, because it's taught to be in this shallow surface level. And back to that example of shallow versus deep, that's where I feel my consciousness was early on. When my consciousness was really shallow, this is all I could understand. So when I talk about a spiritual awakening, it's basically my consciousness was raising, and it was like, whoa, it's like zooming out of a camera and being like, wow, this really doesn't make sense. And I feel what God feels like. So this is in no way, shape, or form to knock any type of religion, because why? Because everyone is at a different consciousness level. So when I was at a lower, and lower, to be clear, does not mean lesser than, right? It's just your experience, and everyone's having a different experience. I don't feel that the higher consciousness you understand, the better you are. It's not like that. It's like, we all choose different paths. We all choose different route of if we're going to live this experience super aware or just in the human experience, right? So if the consciousness level is here, and when mine was, I loved church. I loved the songs. It wasn't like I was just in shackles going to church. I, at a time, really loved the church. I loved my Catholic school. I went from kindergarten to eighth grade. I loved the hymns. I loved the routine of it. But as my consciousness raised, it was like, wait a minute, this doesn't align with me anymore. The same way friendships won't, the same way relationships won't, as your consciousness grows, as you expand. So as my consciousness was expanding and I was understanding, wow, how this whole thing works and that there's way more than just what we can see. And I started having spiritual gifts like you're talking about. And I started I communicate with angelic realm. So I'm really close to Christ energy, which no surprise, because that's a lot of what Catholicism is even rooted in too. But I'm really close connected to like Jesus, Mary, Archangel Michael energy, which I know we're getting way over here. But it's when I started having those experiences, and this is something I said to you when you were on my podcast. Everyone is having a different experience, okay? Just because maybe what I'm saying might sound like, what? You have to remember we're all having different experiences, because guess what? Our experience here in America is way different than on a tiny little country on the other side of the world. There's things that we do see, even just being here on this video screen, that some people have never experienced, and it would blow their mind because they're in a different experience. So, to wrap all of it up, being in a religion, I basically grew out of, if that makes sense. I feel like at different consciousness levels, different things make sense to us. And a religion where we are right and everyone else is wrong feels right when that's what you're born into and that's what you're taught. But as your mind expands, your life expands, your consciousness expands, it's like, this ain't adding up, because there's no way. I remember even saying, again, I was probably in like sixth grade. I remember saying, so you're telling me if someone is born in this country and from the time they're born, they're raised a Buddhist, they still go to hell, period. Just this whole half of the world. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It
So I
does
just
happen in
started,
about sixth grade, doesn't it? That's about.
yeah.
Did you go to
So I
Catholic
just
school?
Yeah. So I just started asking
Right.
questions, and obviously they weren't met with people who were like, yeah, you're totally right. They were met with like shut down, which is a lot of things that we have to go back and heal. A lot of fear. So fear and separation is how I would describe my experience outgrowing certain organized religion, to where my core belief and how everything feels good for me now is much more of a, we are one. I am you, you are me, we are one. We're all connected. We all have God within us, and we're all a piece and a part of Source.
It's wonderful. And I love the analogy you use where as you're growing out of that, you're almost zooming out. So you imagine a camera panning out, whereas before you were looking at maybe a situation. And here this could be a habit, this could be a religion, this could
Mhm.
be your political party, your politics. So I'm the type of person that I like to zoom out and see which of these human conditions or topics are actually connected on a more fundamental, widespread level. So all this stuff is relationship stuff to me. So as you grow as a person, you're going to choose toxic partners less, or avoid certain red flags that might trigger certain things in you, right? So we're
I
we're
like to look at
learning
it
so
as
that we
puzzle pieces. It's like, if I have this piece that's going to connect with this other person who's wounded, we're going to attract. As you're healing, it's like the puzzle piece shifts form, and like you won't attract someone like that anymore because that wound is healed.
the magnetism, your vibration, the
Yeah.
magnetism of it, the puzzle piece won't click anymore because you are changing. Now, I can see that happening as we exit what I would call, dogmatic parts of religion,
Mhm.
because you, like me, I exited Catholicism and then eventually went to, being agnostic, then reading Buddhist Tibetan Book of the Dead, so on and so on. I've said the name so many times, but I went on a journey. But each time I did, I took a little bit of wisdom with
Yeah,
me. Like I didn't leave it all behind. I'm not saying like Christ bad, Mary bad, Joseph bad, Holy Trinity.
right.
No, no, no. It's like, oh, I loved a lot of that stuff, but there was just some pieces of it that I could tell it didn't feel like God. It felt human,
I feel
if
like
that makes
the
sense.
it makes total sense. I feel like the expansion of consciousness is you'll know your consciousness is expanding when you understand it's all connected, it's all the same. When you're at a lower consciousness, you think one is evil, one is holy. It's like you're understanding that everyone is just experiencing it in their own way. So the expansion of consciousness is understanding that Catholics aren't wrong, Buddhists aren't wrong. It is to the capacity. You don't know what you don't know. So if you only see this and this feels good for you, great. That's where you are. Because you can't see the picture in your frame. I think Aaron said that, right? It's like that is a great way of trying to say what I'm saying because it's
You talking about the episode you had with Garen on your podcast?
yeah,
And what
and
do you say? You can't see the
you can't
picture.
see the picture when you're in the frame. And it's
Ah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it so if you zoom out, you get out of the frame and you see the whole picture. It's understanding that, you know, it's everyone's taking their belief and they're putting it through. If you follow all these rules, you're over here and it's separation. All of the poetry I've channeled is about ending separation because it was never supposed to be like our team, your team. This is what wars are fought over people's religious beliefs and it's just ending that. So I feel like if you get all worked up and you're still in a I'm right, you're wrong about anything, it's you growing through expanding your consciousness to understand that that person that you're throwing all that hate towards is literally just a reflection of you. Like that's it's they're pieces of you. Everyone has pieces of you. So even the things that really piss you off about other people, it's triggering something within you. The things you just adore and you obsess over, like look at all these people that live their whole existence is like obsessing over an artist or something. They have that super draw to them because there's a piece of them in them, but they don't understand that they're putting this person on this huge pedestal, and that's not supposed to happen. Any kind of separation, in my opinion, is a cause of pain. It's understanding that you have similar aspects of it's you admire these people, but there's admirational things in you. You know, you're angry with this person, but you're angry within yourself at the same time. It's yeah. I'm getting kind of like, have you ever seen that meme where have you seen that reel? It's like just be chill tonight. And then
Oh, yeah.
have you seen it? You know what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
I'm getting a little yeah, because it's like if no one knows what I'm talking about, there's this reel and it's a guy's like, my friends, just be chill tonight, like don't talk about and then it flashes to like a professor or something. He's like, the world is but a drop. I don't know what he says, but it's
Yeah,
I get
same.
I definitely get like that. Yeah.
There's another one that I love where it's like friends talking on a Friday night, joking about overthrowing the government, and it's like them laughing, and then they both like look over, and it's like a dude with the hood up, and it's like the one friend that's not kidding, and it like pans in slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whoops. Yeah, we really know how to, liven up a Friday night. There's something I want to go back though. And you said that a lot of people wait and they say, I have to be healed in order to get into like a loving relationship. And again, if I'm going to zoom out here a little bit and say, okay, well, let's look at this from not only romantic, but familial ties or friendships or even politics. I do think there are some prerequisites before we enter into that space. And it's humility. I think the journey back to self, when you really hit rock bottom physically, financially, spiritually, I feel like one of the most important lessons you learn in that void is humility. Because
Mhm.
I have to show up being willing to say, oh God, I really was looking at that in a strange way, wasn't I? Like my perception of this either wasn't true, or it was misguided, or it was insecure, and all these things. So before we get to any of the deeper stuff, before I'm even allowed in the door of healing, I feel like humility has got to be the password to get into like the healing house, basically. Because
Mhm.
if you're not willing to admit that maybe you've been looking at this in an unhealthy, or I don't want to say incorrect, but like in an unhealthy way, if you're not able to admit that, then you're not going to last in there, in the house of healing. I really don't believe so. And the same with politics. How can we change anybody's mind? How can we work together, cooperate at levels of community or federal, if we're not able to show up with a little bit of humility, saying like, this is what I believe, but maybe there's a world where I'm skewed, or maybe I've been looking at this in an off sort of way. So I don't know if you would resonate with that, but I do feel like before you get into a relationship with anyone other than yourself, I feel like the requirement is humility. Because if you don't have it, I don't think any of the rest of it matters or lasts. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I feel like a question I love to ask myself very often is, what role am I playing in my own suffering? So it's like, I agree with what you're saying about getting back to that humility, because we always, our response is it's their fault. And I feel the whole healing journey is about understanding that it's I know that you have some feelings about like the ego, but it's allowing parts of the ego to die so you can we won't even open up this conversation because we had a whole go around about the ego. But
I'd be down to do, if we had more time, we'd be a
ego
4 hour
deaths,
special today.
there are unhealed parts of the ego that die. And that's realizing that you're not right about everything and realizing that I feel like it's all self-love. Um, it's all self-love, I feel like, because if you really truly love somebody, like think about the way we love our kids. There's nothing that they could do, right? We're totally great with them making mistakes. We're totally great with them falling a million times before they take their first steps. So true unconditional love is same with self. It's like realizing, wow, I made a lot of mistakes and that's okay. Like going back to the reparenting yourself, it's guess what? I am going to make mistakes and I'm going to talk to myself and love myself like a parent. So that means knowing that line of when do I need to be disciplinary with myself and like cut the BS, and also when do I really just need a hug. So if you can really do that with yourself, like you're saying, and take that into a relationship with somebody else who's doing that with themselves, that's how it grows and evolves. And what I meant by you don't have to like be healed, I feel like it's all just a decision of personal preference of what kind of relationship you want, because that's kind of the thesis of Journey Back to Self. Is I was in a relationship consistently from 15 to 20, what, 7, never a break, like literally doom, 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 doom. And guess what? I had a ride of traumatic experiences because I just went hyperspeed on, I chose to heal my traumas through relationship, because relationship, it can also be your biggest spotlight on all the stuff. So I was just jumping through, but until I realized that's what was happening, I was just jumping to the next same trauma with a different face. And
Yep.
so I've chosen to, at this point, it's been an entire 365 year of being single, which has never happened. Like, I haven't talked to a soul, I haven't dated a soul, completely celibate for a year. And that's never happened. But you know why I decided to do that? Because the last relationship was brought out so much of my stuff on the table that I was like, okay, it's like you get all this information. What are you going to do with it? That's healing. Okay. Because back to you don't know what you don't know. A lot of people are walking around, they don't know that they have all these issues because they're not going in introspective things where it hasn't been made aware to them. They're still thinking that it's that person's fault, or if they have a victim mentality. But once your awareness opens up, you can't unsee it. Okay. So it's like if you realize, like, oh shit, I have abandonment wounds. Oh shit, I put all my happiness on other people. So
Hmm.
my last relationship took out a tool belt and put it on the table for me. So I decided, instead of, I learned what I needed to learn from that. So I had to get out of it because it wasn't going to, I had enough to work with basically. And so it's like I took all of that and went back to my cave and am working on it so that when I call in a new relationship, all my puzzle pieces are going to be completely different. So I won't attract somebody who doesn't acknowledge me. I won't attract somebody who tries to keep me small. I won't attract XYZ of what's happened for the last 15 years in different ways because I already got the information. So the whole point is I wouldn't have to wait. Like if 6 months ago I was like, okay, I've worked on half of this, let's bring somebody in. I could enjoy a relationship. I don't think that you should just you have to choose to be single, and good would come out of it and also more wounds would be shown. But it's just for me knowing the differentiation of when am I ready to continue learning, and am I through all of this stuff I just got from the past one is how I look at it.
Yeah, that's I think that's tricky too though, because even when we unpack our child wounds and we feel like, okay, I'm gonna set this down, I'm gonna let it go as best as I can. There are still defense mechanisms, the daggers, the
Oh,
claws,
it's
they can still
endless.
come out. Yeah, it's endless. And so again, I agree with you. There really is no point where you're like, I am ready. True, right? Like true. But I think it's important to say, like, am I ready to be humble? you
Yeah.
know to be humbled and to be willing to humble somebody that I care about deeply. And then again, what you just said, it's what you choose.
Yeah, like I've
Same.
chosen to not go into a
Same.
relationship because I know that like I have all these files I'm still working through. So it's like I don't really have I haven't had the capacity. I don't really have the capacity to like take in and learn about you and whoever I'm dating or whatever because it's I got all this other stuff. So I'm not ready to take on somebody's stuff. I feel like that's the choice of growing and healing because here's what the other choice is. What I did previously, no shade to anybody else, and what 90% of people do. Here, I just have this long relationship. Here's all this tool belt of information I got of what was all of our problems? That's your first place to look because figure that out. Then it's what role did I play in that suffering instead of just demonizing other person because I don't care what relationship you're in, you played some role in it. Even if the person was a monster, why did you stay for so long? Okay, there's information there. How did you react? All the different things. Some people take that tool belt and they roll it up and they chuck it in the back of the closet and they hop out and they go get a new tool belt. You know what happens eventually? The closet bursts, the house catches on fire, there's an explosion, and then someone can't figure out why all this traumatic stuff keeps happening to them. And eventually, I feel like with the universe, every lesson it's like it starts with like a flick, then it's like a pinch, then it's like a push, then eventually the house blows up.
Yeah,
And
it knocks you the fuck out.
unfortunately, for
Mhm.
most of us, not anymore, but for a long time, it takes that to be like, fine, I'll look at it. And it's like, that's what I feel like my last relationship was. It's like, even though I had all these crazy experiences, like I had an abusive partner, I don't know how far you are into the book, but I had some crazy stuff. And it's like, I was like, I'm fine, just around the flames, like just keep it in the back of the closet. This
This is
one
normal.
blew up my world to where it was like, fine, I like that is the threshold of my pain that I'm willing to take. I will heal now. So for me, that's how I feel like it kind of is. And sometimes people go their whole life with just dodging the flames, but there's a bunch of pain everywhere. And then it manifests in disease and everything else. So we all have a choice when to do it. So my advice for someone watching it is like, pay attention when you get the little flick. Like, pay
Do
attention.
it then.
start, even no matter where you are, no matter what age, start doing some of your inner child stuff now. No matter, even if your life is perfect, if your relationship is perfect, you're in a joyful, happy marriage, please start doing some of your own inner child stuff, because it will only deepen and expand the love and capacity you have for communication and love, period, is how I feel.
And let me add to that, because I agree. Doing the work and understanding what, and let me use the most common language possible. Whatever pisses you off, whatever makes you feel sad, or whatever makes you just want to say fuck it and go be by yourself, right? Because fuck everybody else, right? Like, whatever those things are, were planted when we were young. And when we go through the work of saying, like, wait, I don't need to do that, and that's not actually doing anything good for me anymore. And if it ever did, and maybe it did protect me at once,
Yeah.
but yes, this helps you grow and be what we would call a better person. But then it helps you be a better lover, a better parent, a better child to your aging parents. All these things matter. But why does all that matter to this guy on this podcast? Because it helps you be a better citizen.
Right.
Like, you can't show up and actually have a valuable conversation with your political opponent when you're getting pissed and you're saying fuck you, you're the monster, what are you, stupid? Like, think of the nasty things you say to your romantic partner when you're in the thick of it. When the boxing gloves are on and you two are fighting, the nasty gross say that we're willing, the things we say to people we love in the
Yeah.
throes of a fight. It's exactly the same in the world of politics. It's and all that stuff is just unfixed impulses and knee-jerk reactions to things.
Yeah, it's
It,
capacity. It's a conversation of capacity. Because when you said those words you just said, like, I had a visceral reaction because I don't talk to myself like that anymore. So if you talk, like, I used to say things like that in fights to a partner when I was 16 and he was abusive, but it's because I talked to myself that way. So I would say
Mhm.
in my head, you fucking idiot, blah, 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 blah. Healing, the reason we need to heal is because we can only love someone else to the capacity that we love ourselves. So all those comments and all that stuff, that's why this whole conversation comes full circle. All the internet, like the fuck you, blah, 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 those people feel that way about themselves. Because when you truly respect and love yourself, you don't have the capacity to hate someone like that. You just don't. Even people that have done the worst possible things, even people in my own life, that this is like the height that they're triggering you is something still within you, right? Because there's unfortunately some people I can't like detach from, get rid of in my life, that are unkind, just nasty human beings, honestly. And it's I don't I don't know how to say this. I still have love for them, if that makes sense. Like, it's like
Yeah, it's
they
like
can
not.
just spew hatred
Yep.
towards me, and I'm just like, obviously I have boundaries and as much as possible, but it's also like I only send them healing because of the work that I've done within myself to understand all of my dark parts and understand that they're just somebody who hasn't gone in or understands theirs. So it's like it's not okaying behavior, but I feel like that's just a good point. Like the thinking of that. If you're willing in a relationship, if you're in it with a partner and you're like, fuck you, blah blah blah. Like the nastiness that you're willing to go to with any other person, even a stranger on the internet, there's pieces of you that feel that way about yourself, or you wouldn't
Yep.
have the capacity to be able to speak like that, think like that, feel like that. That's why it's important for your conversation. I don't know a damn thing about politics, and I will tell all of you that, okay? I work on a bigger, not bigger, is bigger the word? I
Different.
don't know, a zoomed out different realm
Macro.
and
Mhm.
macro realm. It's just how I'm wired, always has been. I've always
Same.
kind of been like the we are the world. Don't I'm more into the spiritual, religious, not religious, spiritual part. And I know you were gonna like get into that with me, of me not knowing anything about politics. However, what I do know is it's all the same conversation when it comes down to separation and coming into love and respect with yourself. Because if every person, I know that won't happen, but if every person stopped commenting and just went inward and looked at their stuff and came back in 6 months, the conversations would look much different on the internet.
100%. It is the way we do it and less about what we're doing.
Yes.
Because of whether you're loving yourself, your child, your parents, your lover, your neighbors, your community, the world at large, like if you're trying to do that, there is a way that we approach these relationships that is either unhealthy and unproductive, or it's healthy and productive. And I think I've spent too much time in the macro realms along, in the same space as you have, because now I'm in this place where I have a hard time drawing lines of separation between almost any of it. And people are like, well, there's a clear difference between Democrats and Republicans and blah, blah, it's right here. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah. I in a way, yes, I see what you mean. But in a way, I wish you could see what I'm trying to show you here, that when you zoom far enough out, these lines of separation are trite, and we could correct a lot of this stuff by doing this journey back to self. And so I don't judge you for not being a political person, because to me politics is just one piece of the pie, the pie
Yeah.
chart of civilization. You talk about the pie chart of self. Pie
Yeah.
chart of civilization is politics, your religion, spirituality, your community, food, so on and so on. So there's that stuff. I don't judge you. I don't even judge people who don't vote.
Right.
I don't have any contempt for any of it, because and here's a reason why I want your face in this box on my podcast, is because you're helping people. Like if you do a sound healing or a Reiki session, if you're sitting down with someone and negotiating and conversating about the stuff that's really been dragging them down their whole lives, having them
Mhm.
repeat unhealthy patterns, that's the work. That to me, that's like step one.
Yeah.
You, therapists, monks, preachers, like there's a whole bunch of people in what I would call the introspective. You mentioned it, self-help, right? Personal growth and development stuff. All those people exist in this space to get us right here, so that then we can go outward and share it. And so I'm super grateful. And you, to go a little bit more, how much time do we have? Oh, we're good. Great.
Yeah.
I want to dig in a little bit to the spiritual side, because that's something I haven't personally put out onto the internet a whole lot, because as we've talked about, and this is how you've helped me, and this is the receipts here, because I'm a guy who doesn't talk about
The
God or
receipts.
spirituality. I just intellectualized it. I read it. I can tell you the Apocrypha, the Gnostic texts. Like, what are we talking about? Tibetan Book of the Dead, Zoroastrianism, pagan religions, Native American spirituality. I love it. I love
Me
seeking the face
too.
of God and philosophy. Like, what was the philosophy of the people? But I never had what I would call a religious experience sober. I am a musician, so I've had induced spiritual experiences, but I had not actually experienced what I would define as a spiritual moment, or I don't even
You
know the
felt
word
the
to use
veil
it.
lift. You felt the veil lift.
A veil, yeah, in a way, because I've had so many existential realizations. Existentialism doesn't bother me, but to feel the divine, I could understand it, I could think about it, I could conceptualize it, I could write about it, sing about it, tell AI to generate a picture about it,
This is a
like
weird
whatever.
example, but I just saw it'd be like watching a lightning bolt and feeling a lightning bolt. Two different
Exactly.
things. Yeah.
Two different things. That's an excellent way to put that. That's why I like you. So I want to, first of all, I want to dig into when we pray to the rosary. We were sitting there, we go to confession as Catholics. They tell us, in order to alleviate your X amount of kilograms of sin, you're going to need 4 Our Fathers and 7 Hail Marys. That's like your prescription, and you're supposed to fucking walk out of there like, oh, good now. And I'm not personally dogging that. It's just it feels like this strange disconnect, right? And so when I went to you for your sound healing, I didn't expect it to do anything other than make me feel relaxed as I laid on a yoga mat on the beach.
Mhm.
That's what I expected. And it was no disrespect to my new friend. I was happy to support it, happy to be there. What happened to me on that mat, I cannot describe as anything other than a religious experience, but it didn't feel like it had a name or anything. And so, how did you find sound healing? And we can talk a little bit about Reiki after that as well. But specifically, that tool was the one that somehow broke through decades of this guy being like, I know God. Please, I don't need to hear anymore. I understand. And it cracked something open in me. And I'm very curious, like, what was your first experience with it? Like, why singing bowls? And just what led you there, from communion and rosaries to eventually being hitting. But what do you even use to hit the bowls? Are they metal? Are they made of stone? I don't know what's going on here, but it did something to me, and I want you to talk about it.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier your kind of evolution, and I feel like people that go on this awakening, evolve journey, and even people like me who I didn't know that's what was happening, I was just living. Um, I had a similar path, like you talked about. I went here, and then I went here, and then I went here. So I was raised Catholic, you know, I was going to church every Sunday. I went to Catholic school, everything. And I never saw a world where that wasn't true. And then when I got married, he wasn't religious. So I would still go by myself. And I wanted my son to be raised that way or whatever. And I was 21, I believe. And my priest that I had had my whole life um, jumped off a building and committed suicide. And it just rocked my world. Like
Wow.
it it wasn't even necessarily about him. Yes, I had a connection to him, but it wasn't like I was super close. It was like this represents everything I believed in being in question. Because I don't know exactly what happened. I don't want to like say anything, but there was sketchy stuff on moral parts within
Allegations.
relationship and money. So it was like everything all at once. And
Mm.
the way I was raised, and one of the rules, like the ultimate sin that was beat into my brain, like you kill yourself, you're going to hell, is the belief. Um, and the way that he did it, like he had sisters, and I don't know, but he drove to, I believe it was Chicago, and jumped off the tallest building, like, and I just couldn't, like, not only him, but then all the people, whoever was around, experienced that, traumatized by it, like it just, and like within a few days there was also a kid that I went to school with that shot himself, and it sent me into like what is going on, like I don't know what I believe here, what is happening. And um it just kind of sent me into exploration mode, I think. So I started listening to a church online, a different church, because I was deep into personal development. So I loved every kind of Jim Rohn, you know, Dale Carnegie, all of the personal development. I was deep into that. And I realized like when I would listen to those kind of podcasts or stuff, I felt good. So I was like, okay. So I looked at like online churches, and that gave me a similar feeling because they were way different than, Catholic church. It was kind of like a personal development talk. A lot of churches like that, like just Christian churches. And then
A
for a
good
little,
preacher will take you there for sure.
yeah, so then I went to a local church, And again, I would feel good or whatever, but there was like a deep pain within me that wasn't getting touched. And I didn't feel any kind of like spiritual connection or anything. And then you mentioned Reiki, but how I got introduced to anything was somebody, and this is how I know everything is like so divinely aligned. I know it was my path to go through all of that so I could understand it. I've said with everything that I've been through, because I've had all these wide range of experiences, like married, divorced, been cheated on, been a cheater, been in Catholicism. Like, it's like I feel like I was prepped to understand and empathize so I could do what I'm doing now. Because if I only had this one tunnel view, how could I relate to anything? And so someone bought me a massage, and it was a Reiki massage. Didn't know what that was. Just thought like, oh, they're gonna use some kind of special stones on my back or something. And her name was Tina, and you met her, beautiful Tina.
Yep.
Um,
It's awesome.
and I had a Reiki massage, and I had a similar experience to what you like. She put her hands, and I felt like just heat up my arms, and I saw all these lights, and she was like, whoa. And I was like, what are you doing? She's like, genuinely, I've never felt someone's energy as strong as yours. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? Like, and that's why I just think it's so cool. Whoever wrote my play, I know it was probably me up there, but whoever wrote my simulation, that was like, you're gonna have no, I mean, I didn't know a single soul of anybody that like was into crystals or spirituality. Like, I had never been even introduced or saw anything like this, so I had no idea what she was even talking about by energy.
You're
um
lucky you met a good as a side note, you're lucky you met a good one first, because as a musician, I've been at a lot of festivals where it's like your aura is like purple. And it's like the total fake version of what it is we're talking about here, which is unfortunately, again, as a side note, that's what people think about first. And the same with Christianity. They think about the
yeah,
worst of like Christianity first
yeah,
instead of like the really good, genuine, authentic people that are out there changing people's lives and helping them uncover
yeah.
things about themselves. But yeah, your aura. Anyway,
Yeah, so she's like, you're gonna do what I'm doing. And I was like, what the hell are you doing? And it just kind of started opening up. And the reason I tell you that is she also did sound healing. So I started going to her sound healing. And that's when so much of my vision opened up. Like, I started having these like vivid visions, and they were connecting, and they were like giving me all these different aspects of information about myself and my past. And I just started connecting with the divine in that way. And then, the more that I opened up to my own connection to God and I felt God within me, churches didn't resonate anymore. And because even a lot of churches, it's still putting that guy talking up there on a pedestal. And it's like, I'm so clear that I am not better than the homeless person on the street, and I'm just as good as my favorite musician. That's my understanding from where I'm at this path, is like, there is no hierarchy in my mind anymore. And unfortunately, a lot of religion does that. It's still a separation. But
yeah.
anyways, back to that, is it just was unraveling. And then I actually went with Tina to um, a retreat called the Awakened Retreat, and it was in Sedona, and this Angel Valley is like all these archangel sites, and my whole world just like, it was like all my clairs open up. If you don't know what that is, clairaudience, clairsentience, clear, like, I could see, I could hear, I started communicating with angels. Like, I would get these direct messages. I was like, there was just so much heat, and the Reiki got activated on my hands. I met my spiritual mentor, and it's just like, it's just progressed and progressed and progressed as time has gone on. I started being able to hear other people's guardian angels and get information for them. And then I started channeling, and it's just unraveled to the point of, again, my consciousness has just been expanding. And as your consciousness is expanding, it is my belief that all of our souls originate from a little bit of a different place. So we all have different gifts. but everyone is gifted in their own way. So it's just the more that you expand, you clear all that clutter out of the, it's like a glass full of mud, basically, with all of society and all the stuff. And then you just continue pouring this water into it, and eventually the channel's clear. And that's when you can really connect with your divine wisdom, the whole source of divine wisdom. So it's like, you mentioned the pie. I haven't said that here, but I basically just view it as a pie. And it's, imagine a giant pie, and then there's like 8, 16 slices or whatever. That's your soul, your core soul, your infinite wisdom, multiple lifetime, connected to God's source soul. And then we're having a human experience. So one little sliver of that pie is Georgie, Penelope, Tony, this body, this lifetime, this experience. So I feel like most of us are walking through our life, and there's just this veil disconnecting you from that infinite source wisdom, which is you and God and all of the things that is the divine. And you have a little bit of it, like you have that little sense of like this, the it's, you have the pie slice, right? So it's like in 6th grade, I'm like, this ain't adding up, because there's a piece of me that's like, whoa, we know this, but I couldn't connect it. So like whatever happens to awaken you, we all have different things. Some people, like now that I am activated, kind of, it's, imagine it like, it's like I tap on you, I tap on whoever, and little pieces of you activate, and then you start going on your journey. I feel like that's happening collectively. There's a mass awakening. So as each person comes into their own, they emit a light that then, that's what people call light workers sometimes. We emit a light just by existing because we've cleared the channel. So it's kind of infectious in a positive way, where that's why I do things like sound healing, podcast, whatever, because even the codes in my voice can trigger little things to awaken people, and now yours will. And that's kind of how it spreads, the same way something negative does. So yeah, I decided to do, so she was doing sound healing, loved it, and I really didn't even have a choice to do Reiki. Like my hands would just kept getting hot, so I got Reiki attuned. And basically it's, you're a clear channel, and you're just channeling light from source. And I know someone with like an analytical mind or whatever is like, whatever, but until you feel it, you don't know. And I always resonate, so like I have so much empathy for anyone that feels that way about what I'm talking about, because I was them. Okay, it's, I couldn't have fathomed a conversation with me 4 years ago. Like it just, I couldn't, because I was
Yeah.
where I was, you know? So, and honestly,
Hmm.
even anyone that's drawn to this conversation, is listening this far in, is on their awakening path. And it doesn't need to look like mine. You don't need to start doing sound healing on the beach. This is my path. You know, your path could be being the light worker that you are in your 9 to 5 job, or with your kids or whatever. It doesn't have to end up in channeling and in being the spiritual woo woo that I am. This is my path. I am that. So I feel like sometimes that's a misconception too. People are afraid to get into it because they're like, I don't want to flip my whole life. The only way you're going to flip your whole life is if you are way out of alignment. And if that happens, so be it. So I took that and loved it so much, and the sound healing helped me so much. It really helps calm my son. So I just got my own bowls, and I was just doing it. And then I would go to the beach and do it, and I was like, I should just open this up for like other people to come do donation based or whatever, because I'm going to be here anyway. So it's just kind of another avenue of um, allowing people to come in, because you could tell me how you feel about this, but it feels way less intimidating to come to the beach than possibly come do a one-on-one Reiki session with me and dig into your childhood trauma on day one. It's kind of like a,
I think it depends. If somebody's been to therapy before, they kind of know, even if the approach is different or the modality might be different,
Mhm.
you're going to be covering a lot of the same emotions anyway. Like you're gonna feel certain things and have to look at certain demons of yours. Have you heard of cymatics? I think we talked about this on the phone when we were getting ready for this episode. Um, Anybody who's familiar with sacred geometry, I already knows where I'm going with this. If you're not familiar with sacred geometry, I highly, highly, highly recommend you look into it and all the different places around the world and times around the world that you can see sacred geometry represented. Now, if they take these people would take a metal plate and put a speaker underneath of it, and they would just pour a pile of sand on it. And say you tune it to and you hold a solid tone, you find the right tones, and this sand will shake and produce very clear geometric patterns, and we can see the vibration and the effect it has. And it would be one thing if it just looked cool, the sand bounced a cool way on the plate, and we were like, entertained monkeys or whatever, like, oh, that's sweet. This looks like sacred geometry, though. Like, this is like mandalas. This is something so beyond. And I knew about cymatics, but and here's the bridge I'm going to land this plane is going to your sound healing and feeling what I found. I'm getting chills just talking about it right now. It proved to me that as a lifelong not only fan of music, but as a creator of music, and who has been moved in so many emotional and intellectual ways because of the frequencies I was hearing, knowing about cymatics and the shape of sand and water when you put the right frequencies around it, and then laying there on that beach and hearing the tones that were happening as your very Penelope, very calming voice was guiding us through a meditation, did something to me that, again, I cannot describe it. If I say it was a religious experience, like the audience here, anybody listening is gonna hear the words religious experience and take it in their own direction. I promise you, this was a separation of mind and spirit. When you told us to leave our bodies and to look at everybody's body laying on the beach, and our spirit guides were going to come down in the hot air balloon and we were going to float, all that stuff is great, but I have never achieved that sober. Now I think is your mic off?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Sorry.
Laughing
So
because
yeah, I've
anyone that is skeptical is probably like, you just said spirit guides coming down in the hot air balloon. They're probably like, okay.
that was your guided meditation as you're laying here, a
No,
hot air balloon comes down,
sounded
they're your
like
spirit guides, you're safe. And it was a very calm, it was a very beautiful thing, which I've gone through guided meditations before. I've done yoga classes. None of that stuff is ever like weird to me, because I grew up in a church that was like, this is a 2,000-year-old guy's body. We buy these wafers from catholicdirectsuppliers.com, and here's his blood, even though it's like,
so.
low alcohol wine. So that part's never weird to me. But the thing is the separation of mind and body was, it happened to me in a way that I felt. I didn't just conceptualize it. I didn't just like
Right.
picture my soul leaving my body and the spirit guy. I didn't just picture it in my mind. I felt it happening in a way that had only happened under like psychedelically like induced. If I take a face full of mushrooms, or acid, and I'm 17 or 24 or whatever, like, that's when it's happened before. But it has never happened to me in a way that I have felt a
Mhm.
separation of my mind and body sober.
So
Never
some
happened to me.
perspective for anyone that doesn't know. So the bowls are attuned to all the different frequencies of the energy centers, the chakras. So the different tones, like I'm hitting this tone, it's vibrating and attuning to, for example, your root chakra, which is your stability, your home life, your family, your all that stuff. So all those frequencies, they're vibrating and moving energy, stored energy, and there's many different ways to release different stuck energy in the body. There's a lot of somatic practices, breath work, sound, dancing. There's all kinds of different things, yoga, all kinds of different things. The sound bowls is a modality, and it's one of my favorite ones because I'm super musically inclined as well. But it does create. It's hard to explain, like you're saying, because it's moving stuck energy. So back to that example I was talking to you about the muddy vase. imagine that, and the sound is moving it out, and all these different energy centers. It's opening up, these centers, which is, your connection and your intuition and these kind of things. It's clearing stuff in your heart and your sacral, all the different energy centers of the body. It can also release actual physical inflammation, because all of that stuff comes from emotional stuff most of the time anyway. Um, so it's a way of clearing. So we talk about clearing your energy. That most people, what they say when they leave there is, I feel lighter, I feel clearer. And that's not something that you can explain to somebody until you feel it. So yeah, it's just something you kind of have to experience, because it's it's all of it. It's visualizing, it's walking through the guided meditation, it's the sound, it's actually just breathing. You know how kind of experience you can have just sitting outside and actually breathing and getting connected. And I feel like it's even more of a profound experience for us, because of the society in which we live right now is completely designed, created, and manufactured around us to stop that connection. Like all the screens and the dark fake lights and social media and everything is literally working against our direct connection to earth, to source. So we have to make a conscious choice to be in this body and to be in this experience and enjoy, without social media, nobody would even be able to listen to this. So I'm grateful for all the things that we have. And also, we have to make a conscious decision to get ourselves into experiences that heal, that release energy, that, bring us back into our body, bring us back into our divinity, so we can remember, holy shit, I have this whole giant pie of wisdom and feelings and emotions and guidance that I have access to, and I don't need, you know, some outside source to give me that.
I love that. And honestly, if it's going to exist at all, let me turn my mic up here. If the internet is here to stay, which clearly it is, then I believe conversations like this are really just adding to the positive bucket of social media,
Yeah,
which I think is really all that's missing. We can gripe about it as much as we want, but it's a tool, and it'll be used as a tool
yeah.
for evil, for money, for sexploitation, or whatever. But it can also be a great space for community and positivity. And I love I love going deep. So today we've covered going inward, and you defined healing in a great way, which I'm sure we're going to cut up 4 different ways as soon as this episode ends, because that was great. um, Healing is coming back to yourself. And why do we want to talk about healing in a space where often we're talking about politics? Well, because if I haven't dealt with my shit, to put it in layman's terms, well, then I'm going to show up and act like a dickhead when it's time to start doing debates and discourse, and I'm going to start causing a lot of problems and taking that process. It's
Hmm.
going to take that process a lot longer. And we do this so we can show up for our kids, for our parents as they get older, for our romantic partners, our community. All of this stuff is so incredibly important. Then we start diving into the realm of spirituality, which and here I know we've only got a little bit of time left, but I really want to talk about the community element of spirituality, because I don't know if I'm all rose colored glasses or not, but I grew up in a small town, and the church, by and large, would have each other's backs. Now, the
Hmm.
gossip, the drama, the small town stuff, all that happens. Nothing is perfect, but there's something that happens within church that they call fellowship.
Hmm.
And I saw a special kind of fellowship in your more like Baptist or non denominational. Catholics had fellowship, but the entire service is usually so slow and sad and guilt ridden that by the time it's over, people are like, get me the fuck out of here. We're going to Bob Evans. At least that was the way it was in the 90s. Um, and so the community element around our developing spirituality now is dwindling. I really do believe it. So whether you're talking about your gemstone, zodiac, Reiki, alternative healing practice type people, clinical psychologists, Christians of all shapes and sizes, Jewish folks, Islamic people, people who practice Hinduism or Buddhism. It's like if you don't have a community to help you grow that stuff, it feels like this very isolated, messy journey. And
Mhm.
I feel a sense of something changing in millennials, because you and I, you're a younger millennial, I'm an older one, but at the end of the day, our entire generation is experiencing something very similar at the same time, which is like we want to be spiritual. We don't really sit right with atheism, whereas maybe we did in the early 2000s, late 2000s, depending on how old you were. We go through a phase of it, but now we're coming back to it, and it's looking different, though. It doesn't look like our parents' religion. It doesn't look like the church that we grew up in, but something is happening. And I don't know, you mentioned a great awakening. People are awakening everywhere. And I guess the final space I want to spend some time talking about is drawing lines between people who aren't connected to themselves, but might outwardly look like your spiritual beliefs, right? And how we can help foster this growing trend of spirituality and community, because a lot of people are going to feel grossed out about the idea of church. So you go to church, there's going to be great fucking people there, but there's also going to be people who are just there because they feel like it's the thing they're supposed to do, but they're out there fucking up all the time, hurting people's feelings, hurting their own feelings, making poor life choices. And that happens in the spiritual hippie community. I'm sure there's plenty of people who practice Islam who are also in this space. So we can't let that turn us off from doing this, though. So that's my thesis statement. Like, there's going to be poo-poo people everywhere. It's okay. And then how do we start to foster this? And do you find yourself wanting to expand this community that you found yourself in? Talk to me a little bit about the community that's growing around you right now in this space.
Yeah, community is the magic. Like, yes, people have really connected, cool experiences in my one-on-one Reiki sessions, but what you experienced, I feel that half of that magic was the group of people that were called there. And, I've been doing retreats and collaborating with different people. Mallory, if she watches this, we just did a full moon circle. And again, for somebody who doesn't know, it's like, what the hell is that? It's a group of women gathering together, working on their healing, sound healing, loving on each other. The community is the magic. So, um, what I'm doing and what I would recommend people doing if they're listening to this and they're not local to us, and what's been my experience is I love the saying that's like, if you don't see a world in which you would like to live, create one. So, I when you go through these changes, your energy changes, you again won't connect with people that you used to. So a lot of like when you go on an awakening journey, there is a period of isolation and solitude. It always happens because think about you're in the cocoon phase, right? Before you turn into a butterfly. And you come out as a butterfly and you're like, I'm alone. So you have a couple choices. And this brings back to everything that I'm leading people to is to you have to walk your path and call in your people. So this last like 6 months for me has been, all right, I'm gonna go out here on the beach by myself with bowls and call in people, and they're coming and they're starting to come. So it's like then these people become friends and support each other. Then these people become friends and support each other. Then these people, we did the sister circle. I had two people that I had been previously connected to, and the rest of all those people in the circle were just called from random places. Like somebody shared the post, somebody shared whatever. Now this community is growing. Like that's my whole intention, is to grow that own version of community. Now the difference of what I would say compared to like a church is I it is my intention. I go and I hold spaces. I do not want to be your pastor. I do not want to be your guru. I do not want to be your savior. I am holding the space. So, for example, in the women's circle, I facilitate the questions and make sure everything is like you know, going in a way that's not just chaotic, but this woman answers this one and gives her perspective and blah blah blah. It's creating a space holder. So I feel like the people that walk the path first, and this is in any arena, you're kind of doing it. It's the people that walk the path first need to have the courage to hold spaces, because we need spaces that people feel safe and people feel held. And like you said about people that maybe present like this is the same thing in a relationship. This is up to your where you are within your discernment and your intuition, because you could like there's an example in the book of somebody that I dated for like, I don't know, a month. He presented as everything I ever wanted, and he was like a crazy narcissist. So that was like my discernment was off. So I, you know, I was in a low vibrational weak place, and I was like, forget the red flags, I don't care. So it's the same thing with this. It's like you can feel. Here's a question I always tell people to ask multiple times a day. What feels good for me? What do I need right now? What feels good for me? So if you're someone who is listening to this and you currently go to church, when you go to church on Sunday, sit in that room and say, does this feel good for me? Does this feel good to me? Do I feel good in my body? Does this feel resonant? Is my discernment right on? This is a good situation for me to be in. You'll get a yes or no. Then have the courage to follow that. So what I'm personally doing in my own life is I am walking my path and opening up the space and opening up my arms and calling in any and all that are I feel good to, and they feel safe and they can grow. And I'm working on fostering environments online and in person. I like in person a lot better, but obviously online is going to call in a wider range of people. And I it's my job to facilitate spaces that feel good. I know you're doing the same thing in your arena. It's like I'm in charge of facilitating the environment and holding that space for everyone. And my advice to people listening to this is, does the place you're in right now feel good? If the answer is no, and you are in the pursuit of you're walking your path, you're honoring it, you need to go create a space for people to feel good in. Then if you do not see what you need around you, you need to go create it and build it, and they will come. Is how everything in my life has always worked. Like my last business, nobody believed in me for a single second, but I knew what I wanted to create, so I did it first, and I opened up my arms and called in whoever was going to align with me at that time, and they will come. So it's like I went through the season of I was so isolated. I mean, I don't think I talked to a single soul besides my child and my two best friends for months. And it was really lonely, and I lost tons of people, but I was in my cocoon. And now I have come out, and it was really lonely, but it's the people that I've attracted recently are so good. And I'm not talking like good person, bad person. You said that earlier, and I loved when you were like a good person, because that doesn't exist. We're all making mistakes. We're
Mm-hmm.
all like, my number one tattoo on my forehead is no guilt, no shame, no regret. Like we're not supposed to feel that. And it's just having empathy with self so I can have empathy with you, so I can have empathy, you know, with everyone else. And that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, that's what I would say. It's find it, check your surroundings. If nothing feels good, go in your cocoon for a little bit and decide what even you want, and then create it. You know, like I love writing, so I'm hosting things where I have people journal after, and then we talk about it. And I have struggled with female friendships. Like I've never had relationships that were like actually loving, and they didn't get triggered by me and put me down and different things like that. And now I'm attracting women that just can't wait to see me win, and I can't wait to see them win. And you will always, the universe never takes anything and doesn't replace it with something exponentially better, is my belief. So there might be a waiting period, but you have to get in community. If you're listening to this and you are like, I'm walking my path, but you're in a lot of solitude right now, open your heart, open your door to allowing community or creating it. So put yourself out there and go somewhere. Go to a sound healing and use your discernment. Like, is this an environment that's fake? Is this like a like, oh, we're spiritual, but really they're just manipulating you? Use your discernment. Trust yourself. You have the ability to trust yourself if you forgot that. Because a lot of people, we forget. We're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. You know what's right. Put your hand over your heart, close your eyes, and ask, is this good for me? And you also have to have the courage to do that. Because back to the narcissist example, I didn't want to go, is this good for me? Because it looked like it was going to be a fun time, so I just did it for the plot. And it was like, throw away all the red flags because I'm like, oh, this will be fun. I feel like maturing is realizing I don't want to do that anymore. I'm not going to put myself through trauma and pain just because I don't want to be alone. So same thing with your communities that you're in. If you're in a community, like let's say a church, and it doesn't feel good for you, but you're like, these are my only friends, I don't want to be alone, have the courage to go in your cocoon and be alone and come out and then attract something that's aligned for you.
That's beautiful. That's exactly where my mind was going was, oftentimes we say, is this good for me? But it's hard to tell when we're being delusional, because, I don't want to be alone and I do see some red flags and, I know Jenny's blowing the UPS guy and her husband, Jack, is definitely banging the secretary. And you know what I'm saying? Like, we know these people are up to no fucking good. But they pretend to be these spiritual people. And,
Well, that's a
if you
good
see
point.
that stuff,
Here's the follow-up question. That's a really good point before you lose that. Here's the follow-up question. How does this feel? This goes back to your experience during sound healing. Because if I say, is this good for me? You're right. Our delusion or our want to stay could be like, yeah, close your eyes, put your hand over your heart. How do you feel? Because the body will tell you. Like, are you anxious? Are you, are you getting sick? Are you breaking out? How does this actually feel?
bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah. And that's because we can lie to ourselves and sometimes not even know it, which again is why self awareness is so important, and humility. Because again, I have believed a lot of things politically or religiously or socially or about love. Hell, I had so many negative and traumatic responses to the feminine energy throughout my whole life. I have huge wounds surrounding it that it's like I get a couple paragraphs at a time, sometimes more through your book. And before I find myself in this very visceral, defensive state. And I have to fucking take a walk, man. I gotta like go do something different for a second. I'm like, I am so
You
mad
don't
and I
agree,
have
like you
no
don't
idea.
agree with what I'm saying?
No, it's just that it brings up a whole slew of old feelings that if the divine feminine isn't held accountable, the path of destruction that it leaves in its wake destroys families, is my experience. Now, is that the objective and absolute truth? No, and I'm learning how to again like widen my camera angle, right? And have
Yeah.
my own higher level of awareness of masculine, feminine, and what men and women go through differently, and the overlaps of what we go through that's the same, and all this stuff. But it's just, I have a track record of watching the feminine energy lose sight of itself, fall into impulse, and sacrifice everything
Yeah. So it's
seemingly at the slightest change of the wind. I feel differently about this, so therefore my entire life now must change
yeah.
or something. And whereas men
Yeah, so
tend
I
to,
will
at
I
least
will
in my experience, not be
definitely
like that.
I will definitely trigger you then.
Yep.
That might
Oh, you do.
I will definitely trigger you. So it's like for you, the work is, why does this impact me so much, and why have I called it in repeatedly? Because you're trying to heal something or you wouldn't continue to manifest it. So it's like that that's it's like it's such a good thing when you get all triggered like that. It's because it's like, oh my gosh, there's answers
Hmm.
here, has been my experience. It's like,
Hmm.
and that's something surprising because I always say I wrote Journey Back to Self for me, um, and I made the workbook for other people, is what I say. But all the feedback that I've gotten on Journey Back to Self is like I've had multiple people that tell me, they could only read a little bit at a time because it just is like ripping all their stuff. Like
Hmm.
whatever I say about mine shows them a flashback of all of theirs, even if they were completely different experiences. Like, for example, a girl was talking to me about how emotional and how deeply she was relating with that first um, abusive relationship I had. But like with her, it was like her girl best friend relationship. So it's like it can be completely different
That's right.
experience, but the parallel of the emotion is so. And that's why I feel like sharing, and whether it's you, honoring you doing this, like sharing a podcast or writing your own book, there's a first little voice that's like, who would care? But it's like that's the work. It doesn't. It's that is the great work, is what I call it. I have dedicated in the poetry book for the great work. And for me, the great work is that it's coming into the fullest expression of myself, healing myself as much as possible, and talking about it, because that gives permission and allows introspection for anybody else who hasn't had that awareness come up within them or hasn't thought about it in that way. And it allows you're in the safety of your own cozy corner and can read my story, but it can unravel whole pieces of yours for you. And versus same thing, you talking on here can do that for everyone listening about whatever it is that you're working through. I just think it's such a gift to be able to express.
Absolutely. And I'm becoming increasingly more comfortable hearing about the other side of the equation, whereas I feared it for so long because it had caused so many deep wounds over 30 years ago. And there they are, still swimming around. And I'm
I
learning
feel like
how
that's a
to
testament
live
to
with
your
them.
growth. That's a testament to your growth because your capacity is wider. So like you're able to read this stuff now because you've expanded your capacity. So now you can handle more. Like that's in my experience what's happened. It's like I've healed through something and I've been like, and then like, boom, another one. Because my capacity is bigger. So it's like as you keep going, you have then it's like, okay, level 6, level
Hmm.
7, level 8,
Hmm.
layer 12. Let's unravel it. And it's just, I feel the biggest thing that I would leave somebody with is being open to looking at it as a positive experience and not as something you got to get through, because it's never done. You can never do it all. You can never, and you're perfect as you are right now. Like it's like you're not working towards achieving something, and you don't want to look at it as like this grueling thing, because we got pumped, whether you believe that or not. We got pumped and excited to come have a human experience because this is the only place where we get to experience the pendulum of emotion, where we get to, I always say ecstatic bliss and like the depths of despair. Being a human is pretty cool because we get to experience all of that. We get to experience food and and joy and pain and heartbreak and like all the different things. And yes, times really suck sometimes, but if you go and approach life as like something I got to get through, or healing as something I got to get through, it's just like anything else. You look at it with a mentality of, I'm so grateful that I get to experience this. Like, this is, even if this is one of the hard times, because I'm experiencing this pain, I also get to experience such joy, because that's the cost of admission, because joy wouldn't feel like joy without all this other stuff. So as you're walking through it, just being excited by it, being wow, the synchronicities, or when your mind expands and your thoughts change completely from something you were ranting about a year ago, be grateful for that past version of yourself and be like, oh, wow, look how much I've grown and changed, and not look at it as something negative. I feel is the one thing that helps me most, because I'm just like, I'm enjoying my human experience, even when I'm crying, crumpled up like a piece of paper, I think was your reference for me, on the floor. I try even in those moments to remember like everything is working out for me, and this is just part of being a human and what a gift that is in this human experience.
And Penelope, I really appreciate your time here today. I just realized we are running late, and you do have to leave. You have to
Yeah, I
leave
know.
like right now, don't you?
Yeah, it's okay. I'm gonna
All
go
right.
though.
Well, I appreciate your time. If you want, I can tell people where to find you. If you would like to do that before you dip out, I'll do a little closer wrap up to this. Guys,
Okay.
I wish we had another hour, honestly, because we're really
We
getting
can
into
do
the
another
good stuff.
episode.
I feel like
Tony's
that's
my
what's gonna have to
Tony
happen.
Tony's my video guy, so I'm around. I'm
Yeah.
around. But
Yep.
yes, I'm getting back into my social media game. So I have Instagram, Penelope Sophia Rose, same YouTube. I have a podcast, which is my passion project right now. It's called the Come Home Podcast. We have that on YouTube and Spotify. And I also have a TikTok, Penelope Sophia Rose, as well, that I'm getting better actively posting on. And my books, we have Journey Back to Self, which is my memoir, and there's a free downloadable workbook. And Come Home Awakening the Divine Feminine is a poetry collection I channeled. That is on Amazon. And I am currently writing my third book, which I'm very excited about.
Super proud
And
of
I'm
you.
with
I'm
it.
proud to know you. And you are
Thank
doing
you
the
for
citizen
having
work.
me. Oh yes,
Oh, it's my pleasure.
and if you're local, Come Home Ohio is a little brand that I started for donation-based healing events. So yoga, sound therapy, journaling. Eventually, I want to have like a poetry open mic, all the things, collaborating with different local people that are in this space and also doing this work, because community is the magic, like you're saying. So if you're local, please, you're always welcome to any of the events and anything, and you'll always be welcomed with open arms.
You are doing the citizen work. You are helping people uncover things in themselves that eventually I believe will help them be the seeds of a tomorrow that we can all be proud of. We can't show up and do the citizen work that I like to talk about on a community level unless we're feeling a little bit better about ourselves and each other up here. So make sure you guys go follow her on social media, and make sure you read the book. I'm getting through it. We can do it together. No matter how triggered you might get. And I'm going to say this, and I know I've told you this before, but I'll say it publicly. I didn't know how badly I needed to be around healed or healing feminine energy until I experienced it. And again, I intellectualize all the reasons why I should love the feminine energy in my life, the mothers and the daughters and the fellow humans, our sisters. But to feel it again is something entirely different. So I really genuinely appreciate you, what you do, and whether you know what's going on in the world of politics or not, you're still doing the real work. You're
I
still
skated
doing it.
right through this podcast without any
I
political
didn't ask
question.
you about constitutional law, any amendments, central banking. We skipped all the hard stuff
I
because
said to
honestly,
him before we started, I was like, literally, we all have our gifts, okay? And I'm clear that you can be, you know how some people, I always say when some people are like, oh, I feel like I'm stupid or whatever. I love that analogy where you're like, you're just a fish and you're trying to be a bird, okay? But you're meant to be in the ocean. And it's
mhm,
like, I am in the ocean, the political world are birds, okay? So I would look like a flopping fish talking about any of these topics, but I will thrive getting you into a deep meditation. And I'm fine with that because I'm in my role and you be in your role. And everyone watching, you be in your role. And I know you're probably already like bursting at the seams because we also need to know a little bit about politics, all of us. So you can ask me down
Well,
the next
that's
poli.
why community is important though, because if
Yeah.
I know it and any of my friends come to me
And
and
then
they're
you
like,
can
dude,
share.
yep,
Yeah.
exactly. I don't know what's going on. And then if somebody's having some struggle in their life that they know you've been through, then they'll be like, Georgie, Penelope, like, I don't know what to do. And this is why community is important, because there's no fucking way I can know everything there is to know about being a human being
Yep.
all at once in this life. And that's why we depend on one another. Because if I was God having a human experience, well, I know that this little brain that exists up here can't hold all the information at the same time. So I'll put a little bit in here and a little bit in you and a little bit over here, and I'll stash it in places in all these different humans. And that's how we can collectively know things. Well, until AI supercomputers take over the planet. But
Yeah.
that's a conversation for a different day that I know
And,
you don't want to have.
together,
So
and together we rise. Together we rise. And the greatest gift that you can give the planet is just to walk in your own authenticity, because it's not weird, it's not whatever, it's what is needed, or you wouldn't have it. Even if your passion is puzzles, okay? You just being your full self gives everyone else the permission to do so. And that's what I'm going to leave it with. I love y'all so much. Tony, thank you for having me. You rock, and I will talk to you later.
yes, you will. Toodaloo, kangaroo.
Bye. I don't know how to even get off here.
I'll show you. Show you how we do this.
Leave studio.
You got it. I'll do it for you, though. As a closer to this episode, she had to go, but there's so much to unpack here. And I know I'm going to end up doing subsequent episodes with other healers. I want to get some psychiatrists on here, some therapists, people of different denominations in religion and spirituality, because it is absolutely critical that we have some connection, some reason to want to not only fix ourselves, but then to want to link up with the humanity around us so that we can be the anthill that I think biologically we're meant to be, so that we can start working on community on a real natural, symbiotic, and cooperative level. So today I want to reiterate, I have never been someone to talk about my spirituality publicly because there were so many question marks around it. And every single time I tried to talk about it with anybody of any specific religion, I just end up pissing them off. I just end up asking the wrong questions or saying the right things. And so I had been so frustrated by that my entire life that I just didn't talk about it. Right. And I would glaze over it. But now I'm in a position where I have no issue saying that I firmly believe in something beyond this world. And I think the Hebrews called it Yahweh. Those in our Indian subcontinent might have called it Brahma. Others might call it Allah. All over the world, we have different names for it. And all I'm going to say is find a reason to humble yourself. Sometimes therapy can do that. So maybe if you're not a religious person or theological person, maybe you're just going to find the right therapist or thought leader or TED Talk, anybody that's going to get you to humble yourself and understand that, like, you're not always right. And sometimes you're showing up with a bunch of baggage that's not serving you or the situation. Because if we do that and we lay our baggage down, we can show up as better people for ourselves, our families, our lovers, our communities, and thusly this affects the greater political narrative and geopolitical narrative. And as somebody who spent his entire life in this space, I'll tell you guys that I cannot escape this. Every political conversation leads to, who are you? Who am I? And how are we going to work together to make all of this happen? Period. Every single political, religious, spiritual, all of these conversations can be boiled down to this. So having my friend Penelope on today was, I knew we weren't going to be able to talk about everything we wanted to talk about. But at the end of the day, seeing someone go through losing financial success, having a successful business, owning like 17 stores, having the love of their life just not work out, and you're a single parent trying to make things work. You leave all that behind to become an author and a poet and a podcaster, and you're, her entire life. I suggest just understanding it, because it leads to a place where now I'm going to build the tribe that I know I need because I didn't find it anywhere else. That's what this entire middle road sanity thesis thing is about, is that if you're looking for something that you can't seem to find anywhere, you're being called to build it. Now, you being called by Yahweh, Brahma, doesn't matter. None of that, not in this space, not in this conversation. Whatever calls you to do it is calling you to do it. You want to be holy, you want to be spiritual, but you can't find a church that makes sense for you? Congratulations. You're now being called to start a church. And the same goes for political spaces, activism spaces, healing spaces, spiritual fitness, small business. I'm in a business mastermind circle that serves that sort of thing very well. So community is literally everything. So I wish we could have wrapped up in that space surrounding deep wound traumas. I wanted her to call out some of mine. I didn't realize we were running late. So I'm going to wrap this up. We'll have her back again. We'll talk a little more deeply about romantic relationships, child work, inner child work, and things like that. So please go check out her content, check out the podcast, check out the books. And if you are local to us, make sure you check her out so you can go to a sound healing or schedule a Reiki session. Or if you're not local to us, find somebody that you resonate with and try it out, because maybe you'll unlock something in yourself that you didn't know was there. So I appreciate all of you being here. Again, if you ever have any questions or if you have guest suggestions, please leave them in the comments or send me a DM either here on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you're following me from. I appreciate all of the support. I'm going to continually find people that are doing the citizen work, the stuff that we've been talking about for over a year on the TikTok since 2023, since the French protests. I kept saying and swearing, hey guys, this is community. It's community. It's community. And if you don't understand it, find somebody who does and start building. You just start building the world that you want to see. And I'm going to hope to prove that through this podcast, through all different types of guests. So the next one we have coming up is going to be excellent. I won't give any spoilers. I might even just cut this section out, and then we can say this. I appreciate all of you being here today. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you check out Penelope's work, her books. If you're local, check out the sound healing and Reiki. And if you're not, make sure you find somebody you connect with so that you can start to explore maybe some other paths to divinity. I believe millennials and Gen Zers, I think we need some spirituality and fellowship in our lives. And I'm not sure we're going to find it in the same places our parents and grandparents did. So good luck out there. I love you. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you next time on the People's Penicillin Podcast.